I was scrolling through LinkedIn this morning, which is, honestly, it's a dangerous way to start the day.
Oh, I know. It's a minefield of productivity guilt.
Exactly. And I saw this post, one of those classic hustle culture graphics. It was something like, the only difference between you and a billionaire is they wake up at 3:30 a.m.
And you're still sleeping.
Right.
And it struck me how obsessed we are with this whole narrative of grit, the 10,000-hour rule. This idea that success is basically just a pain tolerance contest.
If you're not suffering, you're not trying.
Yeah.
It's basically the religion of the modern workplace, isn't it? The cult of the grind. But here's the thing with that view, and it's why we're talking about this today.
Okay.
It's wrong. Statistically, structurally, it's just wrong.
Wrong how? Because, I feel like I've seen plenty of successful people who work incredibly hard. Nobody gets to the top by, napping.
Oh, no, they absolutely work hard. But we're confusing the symptom with the cause. We're told that discipline is the engine. Right. The starting point.
But the reality is that mastery doesn't begin with discipline. If you start there, you're actually starting at the finish line. Mastery begins with alignment.
Alignment. Okay, that sounds, well, honestly, it sounds a little corporate HR. Or maybe a bit spiritual. Like, I need to go align my chakras before I send an email.
It does sound a bit soft, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I want to frame this as more of a mechanical engineering problem, not a spiritual one.
Okay, an engineering problem. How so?
Think of it like this. If you have to use a ton of discipline just to force yourself to do the work, that's a data point. It means there's friction in the system. The ideas we're unpacking today basically argue that what we call grit is often just the natural byproduct of doing what you were wired to do.
So welcome back to Apex Mindset. I'm really interested to see if we can actually take apart this hustle myth, because I think a lot of us are tired of being told we're just not suffering enough to be successful.
That is the mission today. We are going to look at the real foundations of mastery, specifically through this lens of finding your calling. And before you roll your eyes at the word calling, we're going to strip away the poetry.
Right.
We're going to look at why some people can work 18 hours and feel energized while others burn out in 4. And it's not about caffeine and it's not about willpower. It's about structural alignment.
Okay, let's get into the definition then. When you say calling, I think of a lightning bolt, a movie moment where the clouds part and a voice says, "You, Stephen, shall be a mid-level marketing manager."
And that expectation is exactly why most people never find it. We have this Hollywood idea that a calling is something you invent or something that just hits you out of the blue. But the core idea here is that a calling isn't invented, it's uncovered.
Uncovered, so it's already there.
It has always been there. Think of it like an archaeological dig. The artifact is already in the ground. It's just covered in dirt and rocks, which are, social expectations, fear, the need to pay rent. But the shape of your attention has been there since you were a kid. A calling is persistent. It's the thing that just refuses to leave you alone, even when you try to ignore it.
I like the archaeology metaphor, but let me play devil's advocate. Isn't this just follow your passion with a new name? Because that advice usually leads to people quitting stable jobs to start, like failing bakeries. I like cupcakes, so I should run a business. That almost always ends in disaster.
I am so glad you brought that up, because follow your passion is dangerous advice. It implies the work should always feel good.
Right. A constant dopamine hit. If I love it, it'll be easy.
And that's a lie. If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
That is the biggest lie. If you do what you love for a living, you just work all the time.
It is a massive lie. In fact, true alignment often involves a significant amount of suffering. It involves frustration, boredom, doubt, exhaustion. The difference, and this is the key thing for everyone listening, is the quality of that suffering.
The quality of the suffering. That sounds grim.
It's essential. When you're aligned with your calling, you're willing to put up with difficulties that would be just unbearable in any other field. You might be frustrated that the code isn't working or that the chapter isn't coming together, but you don't feel empty. You feel like the struggle is actually leading somewhere. It's meaningful friction versus pointless friction.
So it's like the difference between the pain of running a marathon you chose to run versus the pain of being chased by a bear.
That's a very vivid way to put it, yes.
One has a purpose, the other is just terror.
Exactly. When you're misaligned, effort feels like self-betrayal. You're cutting off pieces of yourself to fit into a box. But when you're aligned, effort feels like self-expression. Even when it hurts, it feels like you.
Okay, but here's the practical problem. Most adults I know are just trying to keep the lights on. They're not thinking about self-expression. They're thinking about the mortgage.
Of course.
So if this calling is something we uncover, did we all just miss the signs? Did we bury it too deep?
We usually miss the signs because we were trained to ignore them. This is the interference part of it all. If you look back at childhood, the signals were usually incredibly loud.
How so?
Well, children are naturally drawn to specific things without any external reward. They don't do things to build a resume. They do them because their brain craves that input.
Sure. I had a friend who would spend hours just organizing his Legos by color and size. He didn't even build anything. He just liked the sorting.
That is a massive signal. That's a brain that gets satisfaction from order, from taxonomy. Or think of the kid who takes apart the toaster just to see the heating element.
That kid usually gets in trouble.
Exactly. The kid dismantles the toaster not to be destructive, but because they are compelled to understand mechanics. But then school happens, parents happen, society happens. The toaster kid is told, put that back and stop making a mess.
And the daydreamer is told to focus.
Right. We're taught to prioritize safety and social approval. We're told to pick a career that's respectable or profitable.
Be realistic. That's the phrase that kills it.
That's the one. And slowly, that inner voice gets drowned out. And this leads to what I call the symptom of misalignment. You asked what happens when we ignore it. Well, you don't just become neutral. You start to degrade.
You mean burnout?
It's deeper than burnout. It's a low-level chronic dread.
Yeah.
You wake up at the job, the title, the car, but you feel nothing. Or you feel this resistance to starting the day. And this is where people get really hard on themselves.
Oh, yeah.
They label themselves lazy.
I have definitely been there, thinking, I just need to watch more motivational videos. I just need more coffee.
But it's not laziness. It is a biological rejection of the work. The work being done does not resonate with the person doing it. Your brain is essentially going on strike. It's saying, I am not designed for this.
That is actually incredibly relieving to hear. It frames laziness not as a moral failure, but as a data point, like a check engine light.
Precisely. And to really show what it looks like when that check engine light is off, when someone is fully in their lane, I want to talk about the ultimate case study. We need to talk about Leonardo da Vinci.
The heavy hitter, the Renaissance man. Now, when I think of Leonardo, I think of the Mona Lisa. I think of a guy who was just born with a golden paintbrush. It feels a bit unreachable.
And that is the common misconception. We label him a painter. But if you look at his journals, which are just thousands of pages of this chaotic brilliance painting, was almost a side hustle for him.
Really?
He wasn't guided by a career strategy. He wasn't trying to climb the art world ladder. He was guided by one thing: intense, uncontrollable curiosity.
So he didn't set out to be a master.
No, he set out to understand. For Leonardo, art and science weren't two different departments. They were the same tool he used to hack reality. He didn't just want to paint a face, he wanted to know what the muscle structure underneath the skin looked like so the smile would be anatomically correct.
I've seen some of those sketches. They are gruesome. He was dissecting bodies when that was, well, pretty illegal and very gross.
It was incredibly unpleasant. No refrigeration, working by candlelight with cadavers. That is not fun. That is not passion in the fluffy cupcake sense. That's obsession.
Yeah.
He needed to know how the human arm works, so he took one apart. He sketched water currents. He spent days just watching birds fly because he was obsessed with building a flying machine.
It sounds like he had absolutely no focus. In today's corporate world, his manager would be like, Leo, you're all over the place. Are you an engineer or an artist? Pick a lane.
He would be fired from almost any modern company. He was incredibly unfocused by our standards, but his life was deeply coherent. Everything he did revolved around that single calling to understand the mechanics of nature.
There is a detail about him that I find really comforting, actually. He was notorious for not finishing things.
Oh, he was a nightmare for his clients. The Duke of Milan, the Pope, they were all constantly furious with him. He'd take a commission for a huge painting, do the sketches, get bored, and then go study geometry for 3 months.
See, that sounds like procrastination to me. How is that alignment? If I did that, I'd just be unemployed.
It looks like procrastination, but it was actually prioritization. He valued learning over shipping. His loyalty was to the discovery, not the deadline. Once he figured out the problem, once he understood how the light would hit a cheekbone just right, he often lost interest in the physical act of finishing the painting. The intellectual puzzle was solved.
That is such a flip on how we view success. We see success as shipping the product. He saw it as understanding the concept.
And here is the paradox. Because he was so obsessed with the mechanics, because he refused to just get it done, the work he did finish was untouchable. The Mona Lisa feels alive because he understood the anatomy of a smile better than any human on Earth. He didn't chase mastery as a status symbol. He just obeyed his curiosity so fully that mastery followed as a consequence.
So he wasn't grinding to be the best painter in Italy. He was just obsessively exploring what fascinated him, and the painting was just the report card of that exploration.
That's it, exactly. And that brings us back to the listener. We can look at Leonardo and say, wow, cool genius. But the real question is, what happens when we don't do that? What's the cost of staying in the job that looks good on paper but feels wrong in your gut?
I call this the comfort cage. You have the salary, the benefits, the nice apartment. It's comfortable, but you are still in a cage.
The comfort cage is a very dangerous place because the walls are padded. The cost of staying there it compounds over time. When people ignore their calling, they get restless. They fill that void with distractions. Netflix, shopping, alcohol, just constant busyness.
Distraction is anesthesia, just numbing it out.
Yes. And that inner tension, it eventually hardens, it turns into resentment, it turns into regret. And the longer you stay on a path that isn't yours, the harder it is to leave because you build an identity around it. You become the lawyer or the VP of sales. And stepping away feels like a death of the ego.
That sounds terrifying, honestly. The idea of waking up at 60 and realizing you lived a life designed by your parents or your guidance counselor. So let's get practical.
Please.
If someone is listening to this in their car right now, gripping the steering wheel, thinking, oh, God, that's me. I am definitely misaligned. What do they do? Because we can't all just quit our jobs and start dissecting birds tomorrow.
No, and please don't start dissecting birds unless you have the proper permits. The process of finding your way back doesn't require some dramatic explosion. You don't need to walk into your boss's office and flip a table today.
Good. Let's keep the tables upright. So what's the first step?
The first step is an audit of your attention. You need to observe yourself like a scientist. You're just looking for data points that you've been ignoring.
What specific data points are we looking for?
3 things. First, look at what holds your interest without force. What topics, what articles, what problems do you naturally drift toward when no one is watching? When you're procrastinating from your real work, what are you actually doing?
That's interesting. So the procrastination might actually be the signal.
Often it is. If you're supposed to be doing spreadsheets but you're reading about sustainable architecture, pay attention to that. Second, look for recurrence. What do you return to again and again? Maybe you tried to quit writing or coding or gardening 10 times, but you keep finding yourself back there. That recurrence is a signal of deep wiring.
It's the zombie hobby. It just won't die. And the third?
Look at your frustrations. This one is counterintuitive. Often what makes you angry, like deeply angry, is a clue to what you value.
How's it work?
Well, if you walk into a poorly run meeting and it makes you irrationally angry, not just annoyed, but angry, that signals you care deeply about efficiency and communication. If you look at a confusing app and want to scream, that signals a calling toward design and user experience.
That turns the anger into something useful. It's not just, I hate this. It's, I hate this because I see how it should be.
Exactly. The gap between what is and what could be is often where your calling lives. The task is not to judge these signals, just capture them. You can't hire a consultant to tell you who you are. You have to look at the evidence of your own life.
It's really about trusting your own operating system again. It feels like we've spent so many years installing other people's software that we forgot how our own hardware works.
That is a perfect analogy. And I think the big aha moment we need to land on is reframing the grind. We started this by talking about how culture worships discipline.
Right.
But mastery isn't about forcing yourself to grind until you break. It's about aligning with who you actually are so that the grind feels natural.
It's the difference between swimming upstream and swimming with the current. You're still swimming hard, maybe harder than anyone else, but the water is helping you.
Skills can be learned. Techniques can be copied. You can take a class on how to paint. But alignment cannot be faked. It has to be lived. And history shows us that the people who make a lasting impact, whether it's Leonardo or an entrepreneur or a great teacher, are those who have the courage to choose alignment over approval.
That's the scary part, though, isn't it? The approval.
It is terrifying to disappoint people. It's scary to let go of a safe identity. But the alternative is living a life disconnected from your own nature. And I would argue that is a price far too high to pay.
The risk isn't in changing. The risk is in staying the same when you know it's wrong.
Well said.
This has been a really heavy but, I think, necessary look into the mechanics of why we work the way we do. I hope this helps you look at your own path a little differently today. Maybe pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Thank you so much for joining us on this session of Apex Mindset.
Thanks for the conversation.
If you liked the podcast and found some value in what we discussed today, please like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you these insights. We'll see you next time.